I'm Mike Marks. Most of you guys remember from yesterday. We said we're going to start at 9 o'clock. A bunch of you actually posted up in time to be here at 9 o'clock. There were a lot of well-intentioned people yesterday, but this is Las Vegas. So I figure there'll be people wandering in at 10:30, so we'll just go ahead and start. Before I get going, just so you know, there's going to be several breaks. There's going to be group activities. If you get bored, you can always just get up and leave. But what I'd like to do, since we're doing group activities, if you're sitting a couple folks at a table, unless you're schizophrenic, it's going to be kind of a weak group activity. I'd like everybody to move up forward here a little bit. Stand up, move, come down forward. And by the way, when you sit down, don't sit down next to arch rivals. If you do, you have permission to lie. And don't sit next to stupid people. All right, so if you end up by yourself, that's a different seminar. Move on down. Make sure there's at least 4 or 5 people at a table, or this isn't going to work for you. 4 or 5 people at a table. Here's what we're going to do this morning. And everybody's got copies of the handouts in front of them. You can also download a copy of these. You can just ask somebody at DHI, then get you an electronic copy. A lot of what we're going to show you this morning, you're going to want to go back and have discussions with some of your accounting guys or IT guys. How do I do some of this? You're going to get other people in your company involved. So you want to hang on to the deck, or at least download an electronic copy so you can email it. You're going to get a couple-minute recap from me on yesterday, assuming that we lost some brain cells last night doing the shots of the golden light of tequila. And then I've got my partner, Steve Deist, up here, who you'll see in just a second. He's sitting down in the shadows. How many people in this room have ever seen the TV show Boston Legal? All right? Just so we're clear, I'm Denny Crane, and he's Alan Shore. Okay, so that's the young, smart, talented one. So he's going to actually be doing a lot of the content here, which I think is important. But I want to talk just for a second. We've got research implications that we went through. We did this project. We got some pretty powerful insight. What we've done is we've chosen some tools, and we're going to talk about, Steve's going to talk about the tools, and we're going to give you, this is all being done in bite-sized pieces. You're going to get a chance in the group discussion. That's why it's important that you have multiple people to sort of try it out and see how it works. So essentially, where we talk about targeting attractive segments, the first thing we're going to be asking you to do, and I know this I'm just going to say it straight out, is we're going to be asking everybody here to be doing critical thinking. In a sales-driven organization, which most of us are, we're very good at reacting very quickly to threats or opportunities, and the idea of sitting down, thinking about something critically about which dollars of GP are worth more than others, and really thinking that thing through, that's going to be the first group activity. The second group activity, which is going to be about management-directed sales, will build on the first one, and it will actually talk about a practical tool. We're going to be talking spreadsheets and stuff like that. But fundamentally, it allows you as an executive to have a conversation with your salespeople about aligning their sales calls to the market opportunities. How do we do it now? We react to bid opportunities, and we work in the projects, we go to the kickoff meetings, we do the drawing take, we do all that stuff, and we just kind of keep doing it over and over. This is where are we investing our time, not just reacting to bid opportunities. The last one, sales coverage economics. Most of you have the wrong kind of sales force. Don't think people. Think economic structures. And we're going to show you how you start to do the math to understand what kind of sales force or sales resources. And again, everybody, I had a lot of conversations yesterday in the booth. Well, you mean I need different sales guys or different salespeople, different customers? Start with what the customers want. Some customers don't want a sales rep. They want a project manager. That's different than a sales rep. And so we're going to keep working through these tools as we go, and we'll get you out of here for lunch. And by the way, since there's going to be group activities and everything else, if you're like me and you desperately need coffee, just get up and go get it. Everything's going to stay here for the balance of the time. And just to recap what happened yesterday. We shared a very dense deck with a lot of information that you should get. I would encourage everybody here to get an electronic copy from DHI. The large-scale implications. The commercial construction market. I enjoyed having a couple cocktails with you guys yesterday, and we all agreed that we love bubbles. It was a really good run, man, really good, and that sucker's gone. So the market's still there. It's not going to go away. We're not going to die, but we have the same number of contract hardware guys competing for a smaller market, and there's a bunch of people that are, I need to be very respectful here, so I won't say, there are people that are very challenged with margin management and have special shoes with round heels, so when they say your price is too high, they can roll over really, really fast. That's their form of competitive advantage. So it's going to be hard to get the financial returns you want. And what we were talking about is this whole idea of convergence and the fences coming down between the houses. So there's other markets we can get into that are very complementary to our strengths. And the other interesting part of this, and we haven't really talked yet about how you leverage it, you as a business model are very good at managing long tail risk. We talked about the litigation, we talked about chargebacks, we talked about all kind of issues that go in here that would terrify other people. There are ways that you can leverage that. Now that gets into more of what we're going to be doing at the summit. So we're just going to start with these tools today. But there are a lot of people in this room that have been very successful last year and this year in terms of growing their businesses because they're getting aligned by customer segment. And what we're doing is this whole plan in terms of the summit, in terms of webinars, in terms of the content, in terms of this workshop, we're trying to create a set of tools because fundamentally deep down inside, Steve and I hate data-free discussions. Give you an example of a data-free discussion. Sales rep comes in. This has got 1,000 openings. It's going to be huge. Who's bidding on it? Everybody. What's target pricing? Really low. But we got to get it because we'll make it all up into change orders. Pass the joint. A lot of emotional conviction, no data. And so essentially what starts this morning is we start talking about how do you inject facts for a basis for informed decision making. Not that stories aren't good, not that stories aren't important, but there's a lot of other opportunities that go with this. We laid out yesterday 4 segments. And we were trying to look at the contract hardware market. We talked about end users and contractors, and we talked about the different flavors. This is very important, what I'm about to say. This was just your starting point. We found in our research that these 4 groups of people value different things, and if you're talking about your value proposition and how do you create competitive advantage, it's about meeting these. But this is just the high level. Most of the money is when you go through this process for yourself. This is a starting point. Some of you, talked to a guy yesterday that has really gone deep, an inch wide and a mile deep in banking. There are unique issues with banking. There are unique issues with a lot of hospitals. The whole point is that they didn't start off to be good in banking. They just sort of found out they had a couple sales guys that were really good at it, and they just started to build up some expertise, got recognized for it, got on the inside, can actually do things outside of a spec, go back and think design build instead of bid build. And so when you go through, start with this process, and you start having a discussion in your own company, what is our competitive sweet spot? And what are they really buying? And don't use the words like service and quality people and relations. All those things are important, but what does it mean underneath? And think about it from the customer point of view. This is where the money is in the secret sauce. And so we're going to play with this a little bit today. I spent a lot of time on this chart yesterday. And again, Steve's going to dive into this in terms of the attractiveness, and Steve's going to be putting a little more meat on the bones on the practical side in terms of the potential to grow, cost to grow, and profit potential. And we typically have been in this little routine of just dealing with contractors. System integrators call on end users, aftermarket guys call on end users. There's a whole end user business out there that we've sort of dabbled in. Those people can come into our business now. The long tail risk scares them. The asset model you guys have scares them. There's a lot of things that scare them, but there'll be enough that there'll be stuff that'll be poaching. But here's the part that's really irritating. If I'm wearing a contract hardware hat and I'm used to getting all the hardware, and all of a sudden, because some end users got a relationship with the system integrator that's done all of this electronic access control and building security, they strip out all the hardware because the facility guy says that's important. That was something I was going to get whole on, right? They're messing up my margin bundle. So it becomes very irritating in addition to just the revenue. So this whole idea, and part of what Steve's going to we're going to start showing you the tools. There's no magic silver bullet for you to get into the end user business and the repair, maintenance, and upgrade, but you almost need to be able to do that with a different sales structure, which is our third group activity this morning, so that you can get the account coverage so that those customers see you. So that those customers see you. So essentially, what this project is about is a start. You're at the second piece. We did some research. We shared the findings with you yesterday. There's a bunch of stuff in there if you sit down and actually have a discussion. And one of the ways you have the discussions, you print out the deck, you take some of your bright sales guys, you give them a page each, or a slide each on the end user and contractor stuff, and go, what does this mean? Right? What are the implications to us? And let your team present it to you. Use that slide just as a starting point. See what comes out of their mouth, and you're going to have an interesting conversation. You're good at having urgent conversations. How do we put the bid together? But this is an important conversation. It's different between urgent and important. And so what we're going to do today is a guided tool set. We're going to put more meat on this. Hopefully, before you would come to the summit in Vegas, if you decide I'm interested in electronic access control, how do I do this properly? Because it's more than just picking up a line. Most of you will be in awe when you see the amount of money that's being spent and how it's being spent. You'll do the homework that we're going to be giving you both yesterday and today. Remember the strategic questions? You'll get that done before you come to the summit. And the goal is, by the end of 2013, if you choose to, your board has said, let's create a path that if somebody wants the tools and the insight to go through and really position their business for growth over the next 5 years, the goal, in terms of what your board set out to do, is that all these tools will be placed, you can bring them back into your company and use them, and by the end of 2013, you're dialed in. So that's the fundamental idea. So with that, this first thing in terms of targeting attractive segments, remember segmenting, targeting, positioning, I talked about that yesterday. This is going to require critical thinking, and critical thinking is fun. It's just a little painful. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, and instead of you're going to get out, sorry, never mind. Steve, it's your turn.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And thanks for coming this morning. I know it's probably tough for you to wake up at 8 o'clock or 8:30 in Las Vegas. I hope that you had a good night. Yesterday you met my esteemed partner Mike, and Mike is from Florida. I know we've got people here from all over the country. I'm from Los Angeles myself, which I really enjoy being from, but I know that there are a lot of stereotypes about California. Mike sometimes makes fun of me. Just to set the record straight though, I don't surf, and eat red meat, and I haven't smoked pot in 15 or 20 hours. So we're talking about targeting, which is about making deliberate choices. And Mike said something that's really, really important. He said, this is about thinking beyond the day-to-day tactical, how are we going to get this order? This is about sitting back and thinking about the future of your business. And the reason that you come to Vegas, I mean, I guess, maybe you can make some money, although I don't think they build these buildings because they're used to paying out a lot of money. Maybe you're here to have fun and, eat some good food and meet some interesting people, talk to some vendors, all that kind of stuff. But the reason that you get on an airplane and travel thousands of miles is to get away from it and to think about the big picture and to put some perspective behind your business. And so the tools that we're going to talk to you today about are going to help you look at the big picture. And so what's really important is that as we go through these exercises, you get out of the stands and onto the field, and you think about how these really apply to your business. Some of the stuff we're going to show you might not apply. It might not really work. It might not be a good fit. Some of it is a very good fit, but you're going to have to put some effort into how you would use it. But if you come out here and you leave at the end of this week, and all you've done is the same stuff that you've done for the last 2 or 3 times, meet some vendors, come up with some interesting ideas, then I think Mike and I haven't done our job. Because what we want you to do is think very fundamentally about your business, about where you're spending money, where you're not spending money, which is arguably as important. And so that's about understanding targeting, which is a concept that Mike talked about yesterday. So Mike talked about segmentation, which is putting your customers into different buckets based on what they want from you. Targeting, which is figuring out which of those buckets is the right one for you to focus on. And positioning is about moving your company, repositioning your company, so that you are positioned for your target customers to see you the way you want to be seen in the marketplace. So right now I'm going to go into a little more depth about what we mean by targeting. When we step back and we looked at everything we learned about your industry in the last few months, and we knew quite a bit going into it, and we've learned a lot since then, one of the most profound things that came out to us is how adaptive you folks are. We heard about all kinds of different business models and niches and interesting approaches, and you are highly adaptive business people in this world, and that's very commendable. And you have survived the Great Recession because you've been incredibly adaptive. There's an old joke about after nuclear Armageddon, the only thing that survives is going to be cockroaches. You folks have had a construction Armageddon, and you're still here. So it's highly commendable that you've survived. But there's a flip side to that, right? For every strength has a corresponding weakness. And the weakness about being highly adaptive and responsive is that you tend to basically move with the economy and be very and to basically be very reactive. And so targeting is about being more proactive and standing back and thinking about your business and where the opportunities are and trying to figure out how you're going to win at this game. I'd like everybody in this room who has a 7-figure business development budget to raise your hand. How many of you folks have multi-million-dollar business development budgets? You did inhale because I know better. So
I want one.
So the point is that when we are deciding where we're going to grow and where we're going to invest, we have very few bullets. We have like 1 or 2 bullets in our gun. We need to aim incredibly carefully. This is not about being a shotgun because we don't have enough money. This is about being a rifle and figuring out exactly where you're going to aim your resources so that you can play the game to win. So we're going to give you some techniques today about customer attractiveness and targeting that will be very powerful. And one of the things that you're all going to have to do to make this work is you're going to have to take off your manager hat, which is what you wear most of the day, and you're going to have to put on your strategist hat. Now, most of us are managing our companies. We're very hands-on. We've got a lot of people directly reporting to us. We're involved in the business. We're doing quotations. We're hanging with customers. And basically, we spend our days managing things, right? We're mostly managers. Typically, even a CEO in a company spends 90 to 95% of his time or her time in management functions. And if you think about a second about what it means to be a manager and what you actually focus and spend your day on, when you're managing people, you're trying to get them to do more. You're trying to cajole them, you're trying to motivate them, you're trying to coach them, and the manager's mantra is more, better, faster, stronger, cheaper, right? We're always trying to get more things out of our people because that's what it means to be a manager. So we run around the world trying to get everybody to do everything a little bit better. And after a while, we start to actually believe the stuff that we're saying. Every customer is important, right? There is no project that's not worth going after. We provide the best service at the lowest prices, right? With the deepest customer relationships and the highest quality products. Now, that's all good stuff if you're a manager, and you never want to tell a salesperson, don't close that job, but that's a lie, right? You can't offer the best products and the best service at the lowest prices. You'll be out of business. Nobody really does that. You talk about that, and you coach and motivate people, and you say you're doing that, but you're really not doing that because you can't. So today, what I want you to do is take off that strategist hat, more, better, faster, stronger, cheaper, And I want you to put on, take off the manager hat, and I want you to put on your strategist hat to say, let's really be grown-ups about this. And let's not, run this delusional sort of management double speak that we've been using, 95% of the time. And let's think about what our company is truly good at. And so this is going to be a challenging concept because the fundamental concept of targeting and segment attractiveness is what are you not going to do? Because you can't start doing something unless you stop doing something else, right? If you've got 2 bullets to shoot at, then the real question is, what are you not going to shoot at? What are you not going to focus on? So that's what segment attractiveness is about, and we're going to give you a tool that's going to help you walk through that. On the right side of this chart, there's a classic matrix that was developed by the Boston Consulting Group in the 1970s, and I know it's a little bit hard to read, but there are basically 2 dimensions. So on the X dimension, you've got basically the cost to grow. This is how hard or how difficult it would be for you to get more revenue or more sales or more profit out of this customer segment. The Y-axis is the potential to grow, which is how much is there for us to go get. And essentially what the Boston Consulting Group did is they were the first ones to put this in a quadrant and say, well, what we really want to do is we want to rank our customers and our segments and our markets based on our potential to grow, their potential to grow versus their cost to grow. So if there's a segment out there that's going to cost you a lot of money to grow it, and the potential is very low, then the technical term for that is it's a dog, right? We do not want to invest discretionary resources in that because it's just not worth it. On the other hand, if there is a segment out there that's not going to be that tough to grow, and it has a high potential, then we would call that a star. And that would clearly be something that would be very attractive for us to invest in. The ones that don't have a lot of potential, but they're really not that hard to go after, people call those cash cows or harvesting opportunities. We like to use the term optimized profitability. And what we mean by that is what you're trying to do is not oversupply any services. So if you've got somebody in a cash cow segment or a harvest segment, and you've got a sales rep that's calling on them twice a month just in case, then ideally what you want to do is you want to take some cost out of that by having less frequent calls and free the guy up so that he can spend more time calling on customers that have higher potential for growth. Not saying you ignore them, and if there's a problem you take care of them, but what people fall into a trap is they start providing excessive services. They cut their prices too low, they provide too many sales resources, they do the finishing when the customer doesn't really care. Then there are ones that we're not sure, which are in the upper right quadrant, where we really don't know. It might be very expensive to grow, but it might be high potential, and that's where you might experiment, but you have to figure out what you're trying to accomplish. So this is the scientific process that big dog companies use, and there's no reason in the world that everybody in this room can't use the same technique, and I'm going to give you a little more about how to do that. The second piece in this, after you've looked at the customer's attractiveness, is you have to start thinking about your own business and your core competencies and what you're really good at. And you have to be kind of honest with yourself, and I'm going to give you a couple of different opportunities. I got married about 5 years ago. Very late in life I got married. My brother used to say that he thought I was the smartest guy in the world, and now he realizes I'm just really slow. I had a lot of trouble finding the right woman. And I had a cousin who's a female, and she told me one time, she said that there are 3 different kinds of men that women are attracted to. Some women like really good-looking men. Some women like really sensitive guys who listen, and some women like men who are meek and subservient. So it took me a while to realize that I probably wasn't going to win with the women that wanted the handsome guy. It took me even longer to realize that I wasn't going to get the ones that wanted a sensitive guy. So I realized that what I need is to go after the women that really like the meek and the subservient guys because I can win there, right? So I picked my target because I knew where my sweet spot was. And a lot of that is the same concept in business, which is really understanding your fundamental sweet spot. Strategically speaking, there are 3 generic strategies. And almost every company or every division of a company falls into one of those strategies. The first strategy is called product leadership. And this is when you sell the greatest, coolest, best thing. You could think about somebody like Apple. Apple wins in business because they have the coolest stuff. If you're a system integrator and you're selling the highest technology stuff, and you're trying to give a campus campus police something that they can't buy anywhere else, then you're providing product leadership. If you're selling really high-tech or architectural doors that people can't get anywhere else, you're doing product leadership. The second generic strategy is customer intimacy, and customer intimacy is about finding a core group of people that you can become very close to and actually become embedded in their business. So you get very close, you learn about their business, and you actually become a part of their value chain. Dell is an example in computers where they basically customize their offering. You can get whatever you want, as much memory, hard disk, screen size, everything. It's all custom just for you. In the contract hardware world, an example of that might be a deep relationship that you have with a hospital or a university where you're providing a wide range of services. You're the first guy on their call list when they have an issue. You're invited into their facility management meetings. You're invited into their projects. You help them write the specifications. That's customer intimacy. The third generic strategy is volume or cost leadership. And basically what that says is we win because we sell the same thing over and over and over again. We enjoy economies of scale so we can cut our prices to the bone. As we lower our prices, our products become even more competitive, so we sell more of them, which means we can lower our prices even farther. Potentially, if you're going after a contractor segment that is completely price-driven, and I think there might be a few of those price-driven contractors in business right now, but if you're going after that contractor business, then volume leadership might be the right approach. Because what you're trying to do is if you've got one project manager or one quotations expert that you're paying the same amount of money whether they quote one job or 20 jobs, you want to be quoting as many jobs as possible so that you can scale and leverage those costs and win a lot of projects. So you try to take cost out of it. So in the product leadership, if you think about it, those are kind of bland topics, but the position, the generic strategy that you pick has a profound impact on every aspect of your business. Every aspect. That's why it's so important to get clear about what you're really doing. If you're in product leadership, you have to put a lot of money into R&D, research and development. If you're going to be in the system integrator business, you're going to have to send people to school to learn how to do it. And it's not like one time every 10 years. It's like every 6 months. You're going to have to do that. You have to invest because what you're trying to do is stay ahead of the technology curve because you're in the product leadership business. You need to get much higher margins if you're in product leadership because you have to pay for the expenses of all of this. If you're not getting high margins, by the way, you're not offering product leadership. Typically, product leadership companies have highly centralized management. They don't have these branches all over that all operate independently and do their own thing. It's very structured, it's very centrally managed, and basically you've got a finely tuned operation that's constantly providing the highest end stuff. If you're in a customer intimacy business, you look very different. You're practicing what we call mass customization. Every customer is treated a little bit differently. And the people that are closest to the customers, which are typically someone at a local facility or a sales rep, is making decisions about pricing and about service levels and about other things that you're providing. You would also expect to get higher margins because your customer needs you and depends on you. Typically, in a customer intimacy model, the business is highly decentralized. Because the whole idea is to be responsive to customer needs, and so you need to make decisions close to the customer, which means that corporate needs to have a very light touch and needs to stand back and let the local people make decisions. And then volume cost leadership is about making investments in capacity. Typically, when you're in a volume leadership, you have very low margins. But ideally, you would have very high turns, meaning that you would turn products very quickly, and you are also generally, in a volume or cost leadership model, highly centralized because the idea is to keep everything ruthlessly consistent, to wring all the costs out, to run everything as efficiently as possible, which means if you think about McDonald's restaurants, right, every McDonald's runs exactly the same way because it's highly efficient. So those are very different models, and you need to ask yourself, honestly, which is closer to your sweet spot. So I'd like everybody to stand up. Please stand up, if you can. Thank you. So If you believe that your organization right now is fundamentally has a product leadership strategy, go ahead and have a seat. Product leadership. Got a few. If you feel that your company is fundamentally in a volume or cost leadership strategy, go ahead and have a seat. That's interesting. If you think that your company is a customer intimacy company, please have a seat.
Steve, what was interesting is that several people from the same company sat down at different times.
Yeah, that's true. The other thing that's interesting, Mike, is usually I have a curmudgeon in the audience who is still standing and says, well, we do all that stuff. I'm not picking. We do all that stuff. And what I tell them is you need to read this book. This is a great book called Strategy in Your Stronger Hand, and it shows definitively that it's almost impossible for a company to be good at more than one of these things. And so I really appreciate the fact that you're at least able to take a stab at where you think your sweet spot is, because the next step in this is, okay, great, we know where our sweet spot is, we know what we're fundamentally good at, we understand our customer base. Mike talked to us yesterday about segmenting our customers. The consultants came up with 4 segments as kind of a starting point for you. The next question that always pops into people's mind is, what about something else? What about, why don't we go and sell windows in Kazakhstan? Right? I was drinking at the bar the other night with somebody, and he's selling windows in Kazakhstan, and man, he's making a killing. It looks really great. Why don't we go do that? And what we have found is that the grass always looks greener, and you have to be very careful about moving into new markets. Not that it's impossible, you just have to do it intelligently. Mike showed you the matrix on the right side about the fact that when you're selling existing stuff to existing customers, it's hard. When you start selling new stuff to existing customers, it's even harder. Selling to brand new customers is even harder than that. And moving into two adjacencies where you're selling something brand new that you've never sold before to a customer that you've never sold to, your odds of success in doing that is microscopic. Microscopic. So there's a book called Growth from the Core. Some of you have probably, by Allen and Zook, that some of you have probably read. They did the statistics on this, and they basically found that there are 3 types of adjacency moves that have a reasonable level of success. And once you get beyond that, your probability of success is really, really low. Moving to a new geography, taking your existing business, so you know how the customers, you know what the customer base looks like, you know what the products look like, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to another location, maybe next door to me, has the highest rate of success overall across all businesses. Taking new products and services to your existing customer base has the second highest rate of success. The third highest is new distribution channels. Once you get beyond those 3, you're into low single-digit success rates. Low single digit. Fundamentally, what the book says is that the knowledge of your customer base is the most valuable thing that you have in your company, so selling more stuff to your existing customer base, whether in a new geography or new products, is your highest probability of success. You have to be very careful with this. Everybody always thinks the grass looks greener, but that other market already has all kinds of competition and a bunch of other people duking it out, and they've got low margins too, and they go to their conferences at in Las Vegas and talk about how crappy their business is. How many of you have heard of Procter & Gamble? How many of you think that they're probably a pretty good marketing company? You think Procter & Gamble does their homework? Do you think when Procter & Gamble decides that they're going to introduce a new product, do you think that they're relatively diligent, or do you think they just kind of hang out and say, that sounds like a cool idea, let's give that a shot and roll it out worldwide? They're very, very diligent. They have the focus groups, they have the studies, they do research up the kazoo. Procter & Gamble is probably the world's greatest marketing company. Do you know what their assumed rate of success with product extensions is? Anybody take a guess? When they come out, not with the new product, right? This is an extension of existing, tied with testosterone, the man's detergent, right? When they come out with a new product, their assumed success rate of Procter & Gamble is 20%. 1 out of 5 will work. 1 out of 5. So, we need to be very diligent. Mike showed the chart yesterday about how we would analyze or evaluate potential new segments if we're thinking about growing or investing money. And there are basically three dimensions. There is the potential to grow, which is how big is it? How much is it there for us to go get? If it's really big and we just need to take a tiny little share of that market, our chances of success are going to be much higher. If it's growing quickly, then our chances of success are even higher because there's new entrants coming in there and there's turmoil and it's not a static market. The cost to grow is about how closely our current products fit and how well we understand those customers so that we have a chance of penetrating, right? And then the profitability is about whether that customer is going to be willing to pay or recognize the value of the services that we're providing. This is the fundamental tool. So what we've done is we've put this in a matrix, and I realize this is an eye strain, but essentially what you do is you come up with columns for the criteria that make sense for your business. Now, every company in this room will have different columns in this tool. Every company will have different columns. There are a lot of similarities. Some of the columns will be the same, but it's a unique model for your business. You have to sit down and do some thinking, but it's an incredibly powerful tool. Essentially what you do is based on your strategy, you come up with a criteria. We know where our sweet spot is.
Hey, Steve?
Yes, sir.
Do you guys have enough light to actually read this? Would you like it lighter? Yes, no?
Yeah, or another question is, can you actually read it on the chart?
Well, it's in here. I guess I just have old eyes. So, can you guys read this? Okay, we're good. Sorry.
Wow.
I'm feeling really old. I'll just be quiet now.
Or you could go stand like 3 feet away from the screen, Mike. So each of the columns, you decide what your strategy is. We're in the customer intimacy business. So one of our columns needs to be, is this the type of customer who's going to be interested in developing a relationship that they're going to be willing to pay for, right? So you think about what your strategy is, and you come up with these criteria in the potential to grow, cost to grow, and profit. And you put your ideal segments, and some of these may be your existing customer segments, and you're trying to decide whether you want to double down and whether you want to get higher share or whether you want to invest. And some of them may be new segments or adjacencies that you're thinking about. And you basically rank them and you go across. Now in this example, red is always bad, yellow is okay, and green is good. So for example, in the cost to grow, one of the criteria might be access to key decision makers. Can we even get access to these people? Is a VP of facility management at a university campus even going to answer our phone call? I mean, do we realistically have an opportunity to even get access to the key decision makers? In this example, if the answer is yes or it's a high probability, then we make it green. And if it's kind of average or medium, we make it yellow. And if it's low, we make it red. And of course, the levels of what constitutes high, medium, and low will be different for every company. The point is not the precision of the tool. The point is that you have a methodical way of evaluating your opportunities rather than just the sales guy brought me the order and it seemed like a really good idea yesterday. Because what happens is you wake up one day and you realize that because of these incremental moves, you've ended up positioned all the way over here when your sweet spot is really over here. So doctors, surgeons have a checklist that they use. They may have done 1,000 surgical procedures, the same procedure 1,000 times. They still have a checklist. Pilots, most of you probably flew here. Before a pilot takes off, he's got a checklist. How many times has he taken off? And you'd think he could do this all in his head, right? No, he's got a checklist. This is your checklist for your business. You can't just do this, intuitively. You have to have a methodical process. When Mike and I do strategic planning for companies and we sit down and we force them to go through this tool and they whine and they say, well, I know what the answer is going to be. They never do. The answer is always different from what they thought it would be after they go through this process because you can't use intuition with this much detail. So I've given you, actually, I'm going to go backwards. We've given you a set of, I think there's maybe a dozen criteria up here that could potentially be columns on this chart. And what we would like you to do is we'd like you to think about how you would use this chart, what the criteria would be in your business, and we're going to ask you to spend some time with some other folks around the table, or if you've only got 4 or 5 people on your table, you might want to combine with other tables. But we're going to have 3 exercises today where we're going to ask you some questions about the tool. This is the first. And this is the most important part of your morning. It's very easy to listen to Mike well, it's a lot easier to listen to Mike than me, but it's very easy to sit back and listen to us and just sort of passively absorb this material, and maybe some of it seems right, some of it seems wrong. The most important part, and the way that you're going to know that you actually get something out of this workshop this morning that you're spending 3 hours in, is the exercise that you're going to do right now. So I'd ask you to really put some thought process into this. And what we're going to ask you to do is get together with the other folks at your table. If you've only got 4 people or 3 people at your table, then I'd strongly suggest that you combine with another table so that you have at least 6, 8, 10 people, because part of this is getting the discussion going. Introduce yourselves so that you know each other's names and companies and tenure, and sort of give a quick background. And then what we'd like you to do is take a look at the criteria, and this is the stuff that's listed on this slide. Take a look at this criteria and think about each one of those columns. Is there anything that you would add or anything that you would take off of this column? Do you see how these things would apply to you? Then I want each of you to look at those columns and say, what would be the 2 most important columns, the 2 most important criteria that would be the big deciding point to make the decision of whether we are going to invest or divest or harvest this particular segment? And the most important question that you need to ask yourself, how many of these columns could you fill out for the segments, the customer segments that your company works with? In other words, how many of these things do you already know? And how many of them do you actually not know? And you need to go get more information to fill it out. So think about that, and then as a group, you can discuss what types of information will be most important. And for the stuff that you don't really know right now, but you realize you need to know in order to make these intelligent, deliberate decisions, it's very important that you think about where you would go to get this. How would you answer the question? Now, you don't need to have market size to the 3rd decimal point. You just need to know, is it a $1 billion market or a $1 million market, right? And you don't need to decide, well, is high or medium or low, what's the specific criteria? This isn't about false precision. It's about a methodical, intentional way of picking relative attractiveness of customer segments. And if you have some information that's really important for making that decision, and you don't have that right now in your company, you need to figure out how to get it. It's very important. Yes, sir. Okay, they're actually listed on the slide. The first question is, what would you add? The second one is, what would you remove? The third is, what would be the most important columns for you? And the fourth would be, which ones are you able to fill out now versus which ones would you need more information on? So what we're going to do is we're going to give you 15 minutes, which would take us to 9:59. And then we're going to let you take a 15-minute break. So Mike and I will be starting up again with the next tool, which is going to be even more fun, at 10:15. And what we're going to do for the next 15 minutes is Mike and I will be walking around to your table. So if you have questions, if I were you, I would be taking advantage of the opportunity to have discussions with your peers and also the consultants and try to get as much out of this exercise as you can. Apply it to your own business. This is how you're going to get value out of this process. So 15 minutes, we'll take a break at 10, be back for the next tool at 10:15.
I enjoyed walking around and listening to group conversations. There were a number of interesting conversations. Some had nothing to do with what we were talking about, but they were interesting. Most folks actually made a fair amount of progress on this. Even the folks that were a little challenged with it, they were challenged because of this idea. And we have been so conditioned for so long to react to projects. You pull something out of one of the construction data services or Dodge, whatever, and somebody's going and they're going to the meeting, and we're so used to reacting to this whole project thing that when you start thinking about customers, we don't think about customers in terms of the customers themselves. We think about projects. This is about customers. And so fundamentally what happens is there's always going to be customers and there's always going to be projects. We're very focused on projects. Part of making this work is starting to think about customers. Some customers, if you think about GCs in your market and you think about subs, there is a tree you could actually draw about which GCs work with which subs, can't you? And that doesn't mean that we still put the whole thing out to the trade and everybody bids and we go through this intergalactic Outer Mongolian single-sex social event on bidding, which gets really sublime and silly. But still, there's a pattern of people that like to work with each other. If you get really tied up with a GC, one of that GC's competitors would tend not to buy from you. I mean, there's like natural rhythms. So start thinking about it in terms of the customers. Am I getting it because I'm the low bid? Am I inside that circle or am I outside that circle? And what you're really saying is, instead of just thinking about projects, you're thinking about, of this GC, does this GC tend to have a small group of people they work with over and over? That maybe that dollar is more attractive to you if I can once get inside the circle. Does this guy buy from everybody? So at a very simple level, a couple of the groups came up with, on all these criteria, we can't get there, but we can talk about potential to grow as just one large category is high, medium, and low, or cost to grow is high, medium, or low. And several folks said that you're like 2 steps ahead of where we're at now in terms of the thought process. So I'm offering that just as a frame. And by the way, if this is going to be challenging for you, imagine how challenging it's going to be for one of your field salespeople, right? Because a lot of the salespeople in this industry that have had 20 years experience, a lot of times it's 1 year repeated 20 times. So that you get into this routine, and I'm like the horse that can add, subtract, divide, and do square roots as long as the answer is always 3. It all works. I figured it out finally. This is what I do. Don't confuse me. I don't want to change. So that's the next thing we're going to talk about. If you think about market access, market access is about how well are your resources aligned to your opportunities to grow. If you just keep reacting to bids your whole life, and there's fewer bids and there's more bidders and margin goes down and the dumbest guy in the market controls pricing, it's very hard to have any control over your life. You start to say which dollars of gross margin are more important than others, and this whole concept of market access is how you link all this strategy back to your sales activity. There's 2 key ideas I want you to grab a hold of. The first is that contract hardware distributors have got very, very deep roots in this quotation response project management piece. Part of it's to reflect the long tail risk that you all live with, but we don't have structured sales management tools. It's all about reacting really quickly. A CRM system for a lot of us would be a project management tracking system, or the checklist that Steve was talking about, or maybe we buy radar detectors so they can make more calls per day. But we don't really have processes that exist in other industries. The other thing that we have is, in terms of the way we compensate people in this industry, the sales guys, we have compensation plans that essentially treat all dollars as gross margin dollars as equal, and they tend to incentivize people for the short-term reaction to winning or losing, and they don't compensate or link rewards back to long-term value of customers. There's 2 things you need to know. If you go look at the security business, security hardware business, there are companies that are relatively sophisticated and growing. If you look at Clark Security Products, Anixter, these kinds of guys are making lots of investment and lots of changes in their sales management processes as they move ahead. The large system integrators you run through are like Harvard Business School case study examples of how to do it right. Small companies, they don't have to, the big ones are all squared away in terms of pipeline management, risk assessment, all the rest of this stuff. And the reason that they do that is so that the money that they spend on sales and marketing is aligned to the opportunities for growth, instead of, well, it's Thursday, I got to go see Herbie, but I'm competitively tough, I bring Krispy Kremes. Right? This whole route process just doesn't work anymore. There isn't enough money. It worked great in a bubble. The key concept to take away from this, because of technology and all the cloud solutions and all this stuff, you can really hurt yourself by buying Salesforce technology. What Steve and I are talking to you about is a sales management process. You don't need the technology, but what the technology's done is it's made it cheap. You can have small companies doing big company stuff in terms of sophistication. And there's a lot of big companies that they add all this stuff and they go intergalactic with Salesforce.com and iPads and all this other stuff. And we've actually worked with companies that said, well, it's really cool CRM system, but it gets in the way of calling on customers. Excuse me, does anybody else have an issue with that? Salespeople are supposed to be with customers. A lot of big companies get bureaucratic. What we're about to do is take this potential to grow and cost to grow and put this thing back so that you can actually see how do you start to have a conversation with salespeople that it becomes not bureaucratic, but understand there's an underlying discipline, there's an underlying set of processes. In B2B selling, you are very project-oriented, which is events and up and down and high volatility. But even though this looks like it's chaos, you can't, all those other things don't work, there is still an underlying structure that's been disciplined and put together, and Steve's going to walk you through it. The key thing, for the typical person in this room, and there are some of you here that pay salespeople a lot more than the data that's up here. We took your average W-2, right, from DHI, $63,000 W-2, T4 in Canada, although it'd probably be less because Canadian dollars, so that's another seminar, and putting a 25% burden on it. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money to pay for a low-level project manager or administrative assistant, and there are some salespeople that might be worth a lot more. And fundamentally, if you talk about customer attractiveness, not the size of the bid, not the size of the project, I want to invest that expensive, powerful, well-educated, competitive weapon. It's the biggest weapon you have in your arsenal. I want to invest their time so it makes sense. We've had self-directed sales reps. You go out and sell. And the implications that if you sell yourself first, people buy from their friends, it's all going to be wonderful, and you heard me do my little riff on it yesterday. The punchline here is it's management's job to tell the salespeople, this is our sweet spot. These dollars of gross margin are worth more than others. And if you notice that little picture of the soccer field, you don't just have a bunch of guys out there running around. There are positions. There are positions. The key thing here, and this is you're about to see something really, really cool, but notice the green at the bottom of the slide. If you really want to be a best-in-class firm, and I'm talking construction project management, right, your business, we're not even talking about the end-user piece and different bundles yet, you do not let the sales reps figure out where to spend all their own time. You don't get bureaucratic, but it's not a roll-your-own kind of program. And so with that, I'll have Steve show you the mechanics. There's an underlying structure, and you'll find, as Steve walks you through this, that a lot of your best salespeople are already doing this in terms of their thought process. Steve, it's your turn.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thanks. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what Mike mentioned as being a sales management process. And Mike made a really important point, and that is about how you do this right, not how you spend a lot of money. So if you think about sales management for a second, a lot of the folks in this room have not traditionally had to be very strong at sales management. Part of it was because we had the bubble, we had the boom economy, and everything was great in 2007, right? And part of it was that fundamentally our customers were buying project management services from us, they were buying bid prices from us, and the construction world is very different. We believe that if you're going to continue into this brave new world, especially if you're going to target end users as a potential customer base, and if you're going to get a lot smarter about what type of business you want to go after, you're going to really need to develop these sales management muscles. As an industry, this is kind of a weakness that you need to address. And what Mike and I want to do today is give you a high-level view of the right way to do it versus the wrong way to do it. And we're also going to give you one specific tool. We'll get in a lot more depth at the summit in April, but we can at least hit the tops of the trees. So I want to talk to you about sales management. How many of you folks have some form of sales reps in your company right now? The vast majority. What Mike and I find is that there are kind of two extremes that characterize the way people manage sales reps. At the one extreme, you've got the completely self-directed sales force. We pay them on commission. They eat what they kill. If they're doing a good job, they see it in their W-2. If they're doing a bad job, they see it in their W-2. We don't really need to manage them. They run around and take care of business. The advantage of that is that we don't need to manage them. The other advantage is that sales reps tend to be highly entrepreneurial. They tend to value autonomy, right? They like to think that they're the pioneers out there, and the only reason people buy from us is because of me, and I developed those great relationships. So you need me, and I live for the kill, right? I love closing the deals. I love working with those customers. So the self-directed sales force can be a very powerful tool. And traditionally, not just in your industry, but in a lot of business-to-business industries, the self-directed sales rep has been the norm. There's nothing necessarily wrong with a self-directed sales rep, except that it's very hard to implement a strategy when everybody's running around doing whatever they want to do. The other extreme, which Mike touched on briefly, which tends to be what you see in bigger manufacturers that have a lot of engineers that became the CEOs of their companies, right, is they have highly rigid, scientifically defined sales management processes. And they have CRM software, and they have pipeline tools, and they have all of these dashboards, and they have feedback loops, and they have coaching sessions, and they have all of this stuff to manage and direct and turn the sales operation into a science. So those are two extremes, and what we're going to talk to you about today is trying to get the best of both worlds. What often happens is that when you've got a self-directed sales force and you get frustrated because they just don't do what you want them to do. And we're trying to get them to start calling on these universities because we know that that's where the future is, but we can't get them off of the route, and they keep calling on their buddies, and I can't get them to do what they want to do. One of the most common reactions is that you go buy some software. And today it's really easy because you can just pay by the month on Salesforce.com, and you give them an iPad, and suddenly you've got CRM software and you think you have a sales management system. But that doesn't work very well because software can't replace management. And what typically happens, by the way, CRM software implementations, how many of you have heard of customer relationship management software? So when I use the term CRM, it's customer relationship management software. So it's Siebel or Salesforce.com, or Microsoft has a CRM package too. CRM software has the highest failure rate of any enterprise software. Depending on who you believe, 3/4 of CRM software implementations utterly fail. And the reason they fail is because companies take a self-directed sales force and impose some software from the top and think that that's going to fix the problem. But what really happens when you put CRM software in is you tell your sales reps, okay, here's the deal. We've got this new software. You have to spend 2 days a week entering all the data about your customers into the system, right? So you're not on the road, you're entering data. And then since we're going to have all the information about your customers, we're not going to need you anymore. And each week we will give you a colored graph that shows you how crappy you're doing, right? So what's not to like? So the sales force doesn't use it, it never becomes implemented. So what we're going to talk about very briefly is how to use a little more of the scientific method to direct your sales force without crushing the entrepreneurial energy that is essential to success, especially in a customer intimacy model. Basically, if you think about managing any process, I don't care if it's in production or operations or customer service or sales, you've got the plan, do, check, act kind of loop, right? We've got planning that says, first thing we're going to do is figure out what we're trying to accomplish. Duh, right? We don't just sort of run out and bounce around. We figure out what it is we're trying. That's what we talked about an hour ago. The execute piece is what are the activities that we're going to do to produce the results. And then we've got some kind of a measurement process that says, how are we performing against our expectations and our plan? The most vital piece of this is the feedback loop. The feedback loop says that when we're done, we actually see how we actually did, and we compared it to how we thought we were going to do, and we make adjustments. We thought it was a good idea, it worked kind of, this worked, this didn't work, let's adjust and fix that. The feedback loop is the missing piece in almost every sales management process, and it's the single most important piece. If you think about the feedback loop and how powerful it is, when we learn to talk, when we're born, we can move our mouths and make noise come out, but we have no idea how to form words and how to talk. And over time, when a baby starts to babble and you say, oh, what did you say? Oh, did you say dada? Oh, I think, and you give them positive feedback loop and they go, dada, yeah. Now people are smiling, and over time, those unintelligible, gurgles and noises turn into recognizable speech and very sophisticated communication. And it's because of that feedback loop. And then they become a teenager and it all goes to hell again. But at least at the beginning, you got a working feedback loop. So that's the power of the loop. So let's apply this to sales management and talk about how this works. There are a couple of pieces of a well-working sales management system that are vital for you. One is call management. Call management is about making sure that the time that reps spend with customers is strategically directed. Account targeting is about picking out your high opportunity customers and deciding which ones are deserving of intensive focus. Pipeline management is keeping track of your projects and your opportunities and making sure that when you lose an opportunity, you actually follow up to figure out why and you make adjustments. A scorecard is how you measure results, and then one of the most powerful processes, I said the feedback loop is really important. You need to do some kind of periodic reviews, individual reviews with your sales rep to say, what are your plans, how did you operate against the plans, and what was the net result? We talked to some folks during this research that attempted to partner with system integrators, and that was one of their strategies. And it sounded really good, right? I mean, you went to the seminar, you said the future is in electronic access control, you looked at your core sweet spot and you said, you know, really we're not very good at doing what a system integrator needs to do, so what are we going to do? We're going to find another guy and we're going to partner with it. So far, so good. An excellent plan, right? An excellent plan. Makes a lot of sense. The next question is, okay, well, what were the steps that you took? Well, you know, we bid together with a couple of projects and we did a few things, so, you know, we had a little bit of execution. And then we said, well, what were the results? Well, you know, we kind of nothing ever happened. And there was no feedback loop. So at the end of the day, we decided it was a bad idea. But I could make the case that it was not a bad idea. It was a great idea that you didn't execute very well. Because what you should have done is said, well, why didn't we win the projects? What were the reasons that it didn't work? What are the adjustments that we can make to make it work better the next time? Because if you just hire a sales guy and you say, go out and start selling to hospitals, and you expect that you're going to get a big revenue stream from that in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, you're delusional. But if you measure things like how many relationships they're developing, how many initial orders they're getting, how many contacts they're making, how many at-bats we're getting on projects, and you're using that to say, hey, at least we're getting the activities that we know are ultimately going to lead to the results, and we've got a feedback loop, so we're going to continue to get better and better and better. This is the difference between, if you think about a cruise missile and an intercontinental ballistic missile, right? An ICBM is, we have this huge missile with this big tank, and we light the fuse and run away from it, and it takes off, and hopefully we aimed it really well, and it's going to land, it's not going to land in Alaska, right? It's going to land where we wanted it to land. That's kind of like what we often do when we try to partner with a system integrator or launch a new initiative. An intercontinental a cruise missile is constantly adapting and adjusting, and you don't have to aim it perfectly to start with. It's going to get to the target because it makes adjustments along the way. So that's essentially what this cycle is all about, and this is the difference between art and science, right? Art has no feedback loop. If every sales rep is just an artisan practicing their own craft, then your success is completely dependent upon the talent of that individual. And if they're good, you'll do well. If they're bad, you won't. If they leave, you're screwed. With a system, you have feedback loop. It's like science. It continues to get better and better, and the system becomes powerful. This is the essence of a high-performing sales organization. We don't have time today to get into each one of these. We will have time at the summit to give you a lot more red meat on the different components, but we wanted to make this whole process much more real to you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on call management, which is sort of one piece of this. And we're going to show you how the work that you did in the last hour's exercise can tie directly to how you manage your sales force. Call management, if you think about a call, Mike showed you the math, about $79,000 a year is what it costs you, the burdened cost of a typical DHI sales rep. Now, I have a math problem for you. $79,000 a year is what it costs. Let's imagine that a sales rep can make 1,000 calls per year. Okay, so they cost $79,000 and they can make 1,000 calls a year. What does the average sales call cost? Feel free to get a calculator. Anyone? Mike, did you get that? Did you figure that one out? What is it, buddy? $79. So the average sales call in this industry is $79. Okay? So when he or she rides out to the customer with the Krispy Kreme donuts, says, I'd like to interrupt you for a second to explain how great we are, you might as well just be handing them $79 because that's what it costs. How do we make sure that the $79, well, let me ask a more fundamental, whose money is it? Whose money is that 79 bucks? It's ours, right? That's what we're paying to have a function or job performed. That's our $79. Who's determining how that $79 is spent? For most of us, it's our sales rep, right? It's like who was screaming the loudest on the phone this morning, or he's kind of feeling down, so he needs to go to his buddy to hear the good call. So this is about getting control of that $79 and making sure that it's spent wisely. But remember, we don't want to crush the entrepreneurial spirit and the independence and the drive that make a successful sales rep. So how do we make sure that our $79 is spent wisely, but we still have a highly motivated sales rep? The call management process is the way you do that. Call management potentially consists of 4 things. Call budgeting is where we sit back at the beginning of a month or the beginning of a quarter or at some point in time and we say, how should we allocate our limited sales calls? Which customers deserve them? Which customers do not deserve them? Ideally, how many should I have for different types of customers? So this is about systematically looking at your customer base and deciding where you want to point your resources. I had a great question at the break. Someone said, you talked about targeting, but I'm not sure I understand what you mean by investment. I mean, we really don't invest much. We don't have any money to invest. So I'm not sure why I'm worried about where I'm going to invest money. And my answer to them is, every single time a sales rep calls on a customer, you just invested $79. Every time you have a meeting with your staff and you talk about a project that you're bidding on, you're investing the time and effort and discretionary energy. So what call budgeting is saying, how do we want to guide that investment? We just got done doing that really cool matrix about which customers were attractive. How do we make sure that that actually has an impact on what our sales reps do and where we spend our $79? Call planning is saying, before I show up at a customer site, do I know what I'm going to talk about? Do I have a plan? Do I have an agenda? Do I have an expected outcome? Do I know why I'm even going? Do I know why the customer should care about me and why I should show up? It may be that they had a problem and they called us, but it may be that we need to explain something to them or provide them with some added value or show them what we can do for them. But call budgeting is more important than call planning, right? Because it doesn't matter how great my call plan is if you're the wrong customer and I shouldn't even be spending my time on you anyway. If the total amount of gross margin that I could potentially get out of this customer over the next 10 years is $15,000 or $20,000, then it makes no sense for me to call that customer regardless of how great I've planned out my call. So budgeting is making sure that we know where we want our guys to go. Planning is making sure that they have an effective event, that the call is effective and they don't just show up and say, hey, what can I do for you today? Call logging is a very simple process, but it's the key to that feedback loop, which is saying at the beginning of the quarter, we said that we were going to take our 200 calls and we were going to invest 100 of them in target customers. Every week, we want to just keep track of who we saw. And at the end of the quarter, we wanted to do 100 of our target customers. How many did we really do? And the last piece is call reporting, which is where a rep actually writes down, I talked to John, I talked to Jim, this is what's going on, this is my follow-up, and writes all this stuff. Most of the time, call reports are utter fiction. And Mike and I have seen that that is kind of a worst practice. Because what you're really doing with a call report is we're saying, I don't believe that you weren't golfing on Friday afternoon. I really need the call report for you to tell me what you were doing, and it's more of an activity monitoring. So we would not recommend doing call logging, but call reporting, but call budgeting, planning, and logging are absolutely best practices in terms of managing sales reps. Now, I said earlier that we need to balance the entrepreneurial energy and the drive of sales reps with our systematic management. So the question is, well, how exactly are we going to do that? And this is the tool that is the most powerful tool for tying strategy to action that we have ever seen in our years of doing sales effectiveness. It's called the Call Budgeting Worksheet or Spreadsheet or Toolbox. And by the way, everything that we're showing you today and everything that we're going to show you in April at the summit is stuff that you can do on a spreadsheet. You do not need expensive software. You do not need to spray the money hose at this. It's a simple tool. The issue is not the sophistication of the technology, it's how well you apply it to your business. So here is the call budgeting spreadsheet, and here's the basic concept. At the upper left of this tool, there's a little spot where the sales rep enters how many calls they can make in a month. And we don't tell them how many that number needs to be. They enter it for themselves. So in this example, this rep says, I can do 40 calls this month. You could make it for a week, you could make it for a month, whatever you want, but the rep decides what they can do. The next thing that the rep does is the rep has a list of all of the customers that are in their territory that they're supposed to call on, which may include some existing customers, it may include some prospects, but this is the rep's customer territory, ideally listed in descending order of dollars or opportunity or potential. Once every quarter or twice a year, periodically, the rep takes this list of their accounts and they go through each account and they do some thinking. They say, okay, if I could sell every possible item to this account that we offer, what would be my total potential for that account? Oh, $100,000. And then they say, how desirable is this customer? Do I have good project opportunities? Yes, let's give them a 5 on that score. Do I know a lot of the decision makers? Nope, don't know too many of them. I'm going to give it a 2 on that score. Are they really happy with their current supplier? Nope, they hate them. Let's give ourselves a 5 on that score because that's an opportunity. Are they one of these government organizations that is required to accept lowest cost bidder on anything over $50,000? Yep, then we'll give them a 1 on that. We'll score them low. Very similar to the ratings that you guys just went through an hour ago in terms of customer attractiveness, segment attractiveness. We're applying that now at a customer level. The key piece is that the sales rep fills it out for his or her own territory. You don't fill it out for them. Their manager doesn't fill it out for them. They fill it out for themselves. Everybody with me? So they say how many calls they've got, and they rate their own customers based on the criteria. And what the tool does is it just does the math and adds it across and says, well, based on what you put into this tool, not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong, but based on what you put into this tool, this is how many of your 40 calls per month should logically go to each of these customers. First one has a really high potential, scores 5s all the way across the board. We should be calling on that guy every week. Next one, high potential but lower scores, maybe we should only be calling on him once a month. Another guy, he might have very low potential, right? I can make $20,000 in GP best case. And even though he scores 5s all the way across the board, the tool says, it's never going to be worth your while to call on this guy, so it gives it a 0. Now, when it's all done, this is just a mechanical tool. The sales rep is going to go back and say, well, this is what the tool told me to do, four calls a month with this guy, but you know, he doesn't want to see me more than once, so I'm going to put in 1. Or the tool said, don't call him at all, but you know, the point is not, this is not a rigid tool that dictates how his time is used. This is simply a way of logically relating the time investment to the opportunity. And the cool thing about this tool, the real power, is that the sales rep fills it out for him or herself. So at the end of the day, it's like, well, I'm not telling you who you should call on. I mean, you're a sales professional, you're an entrepreneur, you know what you need to do. I'm just saying, here's a tool that you need to fill out for your customers, and when it's done, you might want to take a really close look at that, because you're going to probably look at the 5th list down and go, man, you know, old Charlie, I love talking to that guy, but boy, he really doesn't merit much time. And here's this jewel at the top, and boy, the numbers really tell me, you know, it's the thought process that triggers. Then, with call logging, the rep keeps track of who he actually called on. Doesn't write down what he did, doesn't spend a lot of time, just a check mark. At the end of the week, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. Takes him 5 seconds. And at the end of the quarter or the period or whatever, you go back and you compare what they actually spent their time on against what they wanted to spend their time on. It's a simple feedback loop. And what it's going to do is it's going to generate questions in the rep's own mind. You know, I had really honorable intentions at the beginning of this quarter. I was going to focus all my time on those target accounts, and man, by the time the dust settled, it's like I just ended up doing all my buddy calls again. I was fighting fires, I was doing quotes, I was following up on projects, and there just weren't enough hours left in the day for me to do what I should be doing as a proactive sales rep. That type of feedback enables you as a manager and your individual reps to decide what they need to change to do things differently. It's a very simple feedback loop. But here's the really cool part of this tool, the really cool part. In this example, you'll notice that I've got a green column and I've got a red column. I've got 4 numbers in the green column and 3 numbers in the red column, the total. And if you guys are really good, you'll see that the green column is the tactical score and the red column is the strategic score. And those are arbitrary titles, but there's some importance in that thinking. This is what you do to make this thing really powerful. You do the customer attractiveness exercise that we talked about in the last hour. Based on that exercise, you come up with the red columns. What makes an ideal customer for our company? They have a lot of money and they're really stupid. They're in our target sweet spot. They have a long revenue potential. They're not a public bid house. They're financially stable. I heard a lot of great ideas as I was walking through. They're a property management company that manages a lot of property so that if we win, we get huge potential. They're a construction company that tends to do only the peripheral or the shell pieces, and when we win those jobs, we get an opportunity to bid on the tenant improvement core pieces. That's where we really make our money. They're a campus that really cares about green energy or having attractive buildings or looking high-tech so that when the potential freshmen show up, they're all impressed. Whatever you thought your strategic criteria are, you put those as the red columns. That's the strategic criteria that you're expecting your sales reps to look at when they're deciding who to call on. The green boxes, which is the tactical criteria, you get a group of your sales rep in a room and you say, okay, how does a really top performing sales rep in our company figure out who he's going to call on? And they go, well, if they got a lot of projects, I call on. Okay, let's put that column, projects. What else? Well, if I really know all the key people, okay, then let's put access to key decision makers. Great column. What else? Well, if they're really pissed off, if they're happy with their current guy, then I don't bother. Okay, satisfaction with current supply. The sales reps develop the green columns. You as owners and strategists develop the red columns, and you've just created a tool that has best selling practices incorporated into the tool that is filled out and completed by the sales rep, him or herself, and it ties your strategy directly down to the activities and the $79 call investment that each rep is making. What you've just done with this tool is when a sales rep gets in their car in the morning and they back out of the driveway and they're trying to decide, are they going to turn right or are they going to turn left? You're helping them make that decision based on your company's strategy rather than just habit or anything else. So I've got another example of the tool, and in this one, they've actually got it broken up into 3 categories: how growable they are, the project score. This might be a better tool for contractors, whereas this might be a slightly better example for an end user. Just trying to give you a couple more examples. And on this last chart, before our exercise, I've got a list. What makes an ideal customer? Very close to the exercise that we had in the previous hour, but what makes an ideal customer? Who wins the gold medal, who wins the bronze medal, and who wins the silver medal in our contest? The potential strategic criteria would be things that you would dictate to your sales force to align their activities with your strategy. The potential tactical criteria are the things that your sales reps might come up with when they're doing this exercise. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to take another do another exercise. We've got about 10 minutes to do this, and we want to do exactly the same thing that you did before, which is get back together again in the tables with the groups. And as I said earlier, this is the most important part of your morning, is thinking about how this would apply to your company and how you could get your sales force to be strategically directed rather than just self-directed without crushing their autonomy and their energy and their entrepreneurial zest, but to get them pointed in the right direction so that they are aligned with your strategy. So what we'd like you to do as groups is discuss the practices that make a great sales rep. And keep in mind that for a lot of you, especially the ones where you're either sole proprietors or you're the CEO that founded the company, you may be the best sales rep in your company. How do they choose what customers to focus on? How much time do they spend with high potential customers versus everybody else? And I'm going to talk later about the difference between demand fulfillment and demand creation. Demand creation is about selling solutions, increasing demand for your product, actually selling, and demand fulfillment is about servicing. What's the right division or balance between those two? And then think about these questions. What's the best criteria to use on your call budgeting worksheet? And if you want to just take this list and scratch them out or add to them, that may be the best way to do it. Do you think, ask yourself, and this is more of a personal question, would this type of tool be beneficial to your sales force, make them more effective, and increase your chances of success, whatever your chosen strategy? And think about how you might use that in your company. So we're going to give you 10 minutes to do that. Mike and I will be walking around to answer questions. I'm actually running a little bit late, I apologize, but at 11:02, we will give you a break until 11:15, and then we'll come back and talk about the third tool. So if you could take 10 minutes, go through this exercise as a group, and feel free to pigeonhole Mike or I with any questions that you have.
We saved the best for last. This is about, I mentioned yesterday we're money guys. It's real simple. It's just if you don't understand something, figure out how the money works and you can figure out how it goes. I heard several examples of people talking about things that they're doing, and this math is going to justify some of the things that we were doing. So the key thing I want you to get in terms of the implication of our research is that new markets, and this is the cool part that I got excited about, new markets. I want to increase my end user business. Remember, we sold to contractors, system integrators sold to end users. I want to get access to that money. I want end user business in both the repair, maintenance, and upgrade and the construction projects that they do. The selling cycle is very different. The selling cycle, basically, if you look at a system integrator, I make a small percentage of my money, maybe 30% on new construction. 70% is somebody comes in and they want to put another camera by the dumpster because somebody broke into the dumpster and started living in it or something. I mean, there's ongoing things and upgrades and changes, and there's a lot of money. So the key issue is, how do you pay for the sales call? That $79, that's your money. With self-directed sales forces, on the commission, we've left it up to them to go spend your money wherever they see fit. Essentially what we're saying, since it's your money, how do I get a gross profit dollar bundle that makes enough sense to cover that $79 call? Because if I call on this guy 10 times, it's basically $800 I've just burned. How much gross profit do I need to get an effective territory coverage ratio? I mean, the whole thing, it all comes down to math and coverage. I need a bundle. Steve's going to walk you through the mechanics of that. But I want to introduce a concept called RODI and incremental RODI. Think about the return on time invested. This is the difference between demand creation and demand fulfillment. Demand creation, I am getting access to a market. I'm getting a contractor, an end user, to decide that I'm inside this circle and I have access to that revenue. I'm getting them to decide to let me participate in the bid process. Everything from the quote all the way through to delivery and getting paid after all the chargebacks is demand fulfillment. That's demand fulfillment. And a lot of times we use expensive demand creation resources to do tasks that are essentially project management driven or clerical, and so you're overspending, you're overserving that market. So here's an example. 5-year history. The first column is the sales to a customer. We're just going to arbitrarily, I just made this up so the math worked. See the column there? It says GP dollars. Notice the GP dollars increase with the revenue from the customer. You notice in the fine print there, you can see the margins actually declining as we get more of it. Where it's need a sharper pencil on this, you'll make it up down the road past the joint. And so what we basically did is we figured that they're making 1,000 calls a year at $84 a sales call. So I know in terms of the GP per sales call if this guy's going, because it's a weekly call frequency, right? It's weekly, right, Steve? I'm getting $60 a GP in that first year. I'm getting $180 in GP in the second year. And so essentially what I'm going to do is the return on time invested is what is the GP dollars per sales call divided by the cost of the sales call. And does everybody understand you need a positive number? It's not like used cars. You can't sell below cost and make it up on volume. Right? So theoretically, it doesn't mean every call has to get more GP dollars, but over a string of calls I'm investing, the return that I'm getting is bigger, obviously, with big customers. We all know that. That's tattooed on our left butt cheek. I mean, it's deep in our DNA. But here's the part that's interesting. And this, in a project business, this is how you start to think about demand creation versus demand fulfillment. A lot of what your field salespeople do is demand fulfillment activity. Project managers, a lot of other people can do that. Field sales, or you as a senior executive, is the only person that can really go out and do that demand creation. Short example. I go to a general contractor and say, "Hi, I'm Mike from Acme Screen Door and Missile Supply." The GC says, "I'm happy with my current supplier. The last thing I need is another contract hardware guy." I have to look at, everybody's got their own style, I have to look that guy in the eye and say, well, of course you're happy with your current supplier. If you weren't, you'd be a dork. The reason I'm here is that your expectations are too low. Isn't that what selling's about? It's disrupting that guy's supplier base so that they choose me. Field salespeople, that is a magic sweet spot, and they will, long after we're all gone, that profession will still exist. But take a look at the difference between servicing an account and doing demand creation. If you notice in year 1, 2, 3, as we go through this thing, the incremental gross profit dollars, essentially, we're looking at the increase from 60 in year 1 to 150. That's 90K. Everybody see, how much did it grow? The GP bundle, did it grow? There gets to be a point, if you look at year 4, that I didn't get much growth. An incremental roadie is taking a look at what is the cost of all these sales calls I make divided into the growth in GP dollars. If you're using your sales force defensively to service customers, you're going to have very low incremental ROTI, R-O-I-T-I. Because what they're going to do is they just keep reacting to projects, and that's the only thing that they do. When there's a lot of projects, the numbers are good, and when there's not a lot of projects, they're not. And what we've done when it was one size fits all, we just want everybody to be busy. We designed this model during a construction boom with high levels of work with contractors. That was our sweet spot, and the math worked beautifully. You actually are a highly evolved organism that was designed for a model and for a market that doesn't exist. It's gone now. So the question is, what are the choices and what are the options? This, to me, is my favorite part of the whole thing that we're doing this morning. So I'll turn this back to Steve, and he's going to talk about a product basket.
All right, thank you.
Believe it or not, we're actually on time.
I know, enjoy it. It's the first time. So the product basket is a really important concept, and the reason that we're talking about this is because when we talk to a lot of the folks in this room, not just today in the roundtables, but earlier in this process, going all the way back to May, and even some of our work in the past 5 years, almost everybody that we talk to says, I'm currently doing 70% or 80% project work for contractors. I'm kind of nibbling, I'm getting 10% or 20% with end users, but boy, in 5 years, I'd really like that to be 50-50. There is a lot of energy, I think, in this room about going after new markets to replace the construction Armageddon that we've all survived. And the challenge that we have is how do we get into that new market? A lot of folks have fundamentally what they're calling sales forces that are really about demand fulfillment. They're about servicing the customer, they're about doing quotations, they're about following up on problems, they're about making sure projects are problem-free. Those are demand fulfillment or customer service type activities that are incredibly important, but they are not true selling. They are not true demand creation. And one of the things that I think holds a lot of folks back from investing in demand creation is that they don't know how the money or how the numbers are going to work. So in the next 15 minutes, we're going to show you a process for how you can make sure that the numbers work and start to make intelligent decisions about proactive investments in demand creation so that you can be out there with intentional growth and strategic growth as opposed to only reacting to the dwindling construction market. The key to the economics is what we call sales coverage, or the cost of coverage. How much does the market allow us to pay for our sales resources? And the fundamental concept is the more that you can sell, the better your coverage is. And the better your coverage is, the more you sell. So essentially, if you can go to a university, to a facility manager at a hospital, if you can go to a property management company and you can sit down there and you've got your $79 sales call that you're spending to sit down with that person, if the net result of that conversation or that series of conversations is that you can end up selling them $50,000 a year of product, then there's a certain economics there, right? I spend $79 for, a year every time I call them, 12 times a year. At the end of the day, I might have the opportunity to make $50,000. There's an economic model there that we're going to show. But if you can sit down and spend that same $79, and the net result of that is you can sell them $250,000 worth of stuff, then the economics get a lot sweeter. Is everybody with me? So the more that you can sell, the wider the product basket is, the more the economics make sense. Well, duh, that's a blinding flash of the obvious. Of course, we'd like to sell more rather than less, but here's where the important math comes in. If you can sell that customer base $250,000 instead of $50,000, guess what? You can afford 5 times the sales force, right? You got 5 times the gross margin potential. You can afford 5 times as many sales reps. If you can afford 5 times as many sales reps, then your sales reps can provide your company is providing 5 times the intensity of selling effort. If you can provide 5 times the intensity of the selling effort, how much better are your relationships going to be in your customer intimacy model? It's huge. So now I'm not just doing this drive-by where I'm dropping off the catalogs and saying I'm a really good guy. I can spend 3 hours and I can talk to the locksmith, and then I can go over and talk to the carpentry guy, and then I can go over and talk to the project management guy, and then I can go over and talk to the IT guy that does the electronic access control. They all love me. I'm explaining how it's all connected together, and I'm the guy, and I'm already an approved vendor, and everything's tied together. Now, suddenly, I've got a much deeper relationship. I'm selling a wider product basket, and the economics support a better sales force, and it becomes a virtuous cycle where being able to sell more stuff enables me to provide more intensive sales coverage, which deepens my relationship with the organization, which allows me, in turn, to get more at-bats for more dollars. And that's the fundamental concept of doing this. Now, one of the groups that I talked to 15 minutes ago says, we want to hire a sales rep. Here's our problem. In order to be a good sales rep in this business, you got to have 5 years of experience. You got to really know your technical stuff. Now, I think you do need to have technical expertise, but I don't think you need to be the 5 years of experience. I think you need 1 or 2, because what you need your sales reps to be doing is not getting into the, is that a 12-volt dry contact or a 24-volt dry contact? That's not what this guy is doing. The sales rep's creating demand by understanding the pains of the customer and figuring out how your company can solve those pains. They don't need to be a technical dweeb. They can call in the cavalry. They need to be able to have enough credibility to talk to the locksmith and know the difference between, Yale and Sargent. They don't need to be the 10-year technical expert that can explain every part number in the Yale catalog. I don't think anybody can do that, frankly. So what you're trying to do is essentially have a sales generalist who can appeal to these customers, and as Mike said yesterday, is very customer-focused rather than product-focused, because you're trying to drive the customer intimacy relationship. The big challenges in doing this, and I've got this really cheesy animation. So Southern California, if I have one guy, the best he can be is a trapper. He can run around and get opportunities when they rise. But if I sell more, I can have 3 guys who can be real hunters. The challenges in moving to this model, or having this model, there are basically 3. One is you need a different type of person. You may have people in your organization who are capable or latent salespeople, you just don't know it. In a lot of cases, the people you've been relying on to provide takeoffs and technical resources just aren't the right people to be solution sales reps with relationship development skills. The second thing that you have to do, which we talked about earlier, is you have to make sure that you are strategically assigning your reps and your resources based on the opportunity rather than letting them decide who they're going to call on. Because if it's just whoever they call on, you're never going to make this model work. And the third piece is that you have to have an organizational structure so that the relationship development person can use lower cost, more effective resources and bring them in technical specialists, quotation specialists, project managers, to are less expensive, and they can apply those resources. So what you really need here is you need a quarterback model where you've got a whole team. The quarterback is the sales reps calling the shots, but you've got the wide receiver and the running back and the other people that you can bring in because they cost less and do a better job. So it's a more flexible structure, and the economics are what's really important. From a sales standpoint, you have probably a one-size-fits-all sales model. And we want you to think a little bit about sort of an alternative economic model. If you do your customer attractiveness and you decide who's the gold medal customer, who's the silver medal customer, and who's the bronze customer, some of you may have lead customers that you're losing your butt on, right? You should just get rid of. But you've got your gold, silver medal, and bronze customers. Rather than saying, well, I'm going to send this $79 a call person, I'm going to fill up the Escalade and I'm going to send them out on the 405 freeway in LA and they're going to drive all over the place. Maybe there's a very limited number of contractors and maybe big university campuses or hospital systems that are worthy, that the math says are worthy of that intensive selling cost. There's a set in the middle that, they're good business, but boy, they're not worth $79 a call. And then there's some that maybe aren't worth any of it. And you strategically decide which customers are in which bucket so that you're sending your sales reps where they can be the most effective. A lot of people, and it's not very common in this industry, but it's becoming very common in similar industries, employ an inside sales rep that is probably about 60% as expensive. And an inside sales rep is not somebody who answers the phone or does the takeoffs or does the quotations. An inside salesperson is an outside salesperson without a car. They still make proactive phone calls, they still target customers, they still develop relationships, and maybe once a year they drive around so that everybody can put a face to the voice, but fundamentally they're doing that with their phone, with their email, and sometimes even with Skype. The economics allow that to support. And the last piece is the technical specialist. Things like project managers or technical experts are back in the back office to help. So you have the project staff, which are the customer relationship folks, which you can think about as being, if you go to a doctor's office, the receptionist. The inside sales reps are kind of like the nurses. The field sales reps are like your high-powered doctors. And the technical specialists are the surgeons that are very good at a particular job, very cost-effective, and you can use them for any of the customers from the other group. This structure can help make the economics work. It's 20 minutes before lunch, and I'm showing you an incredibly dense table with a lot of numbers on it, and we're in Las Vegas. There's probably something wrong with this picture, but I'm gonna proceed. I don't expect you to actually follow the numbers, but it is important for you to get the concept because it's really not that complicated. In order for you to figure out, can you afford the selling resources? Can you afford to do this? What customers make economic sense? You have to come up with a cost of coverage. And what you do is you put together a simple model, and this is actually fairly close, to say, what do we expect our field sales rep or inside sales rep to do? The green items here are demand creation activities. We expect them to do research on accounts. We want them to know the difference between the university that cares about security and the university that doesn't care about security, because this one's a much better target, but somebody's going to have to figure that out. We expect them to do research. We expect them to do some targeting and closing, where once they've identified a good prospect, they're going to learn who the decision makers are, they're going to put together a penetration plan, they're going to go out there and visit them, they're going to do additional research on the company. We expect them to manage an initial order. Once we get an at-bat, right, the maintenance guy says, all right, he's going to give us a shot because he's got a bent frame. We're the only guys that can take care of that, so he's going to give us a shot. We need to manage that, make sure we deliver flawlessly for him. And then once we've closed that deal, they know who we are, we're starting to get traction, we need to manage the relationship. You could make the case that all of those activities are demand creation type activities in the green. Then there's some demand fulfillment that we're expecting even a field sales rep to do, project support, order processing. And we basically say, what do we want a field sales rep to do? And we set the time that we allocate, and we say we're expecting that they're going to spend 60% of their time in demand creation, 40% in demand fulfillment. That's what we set strategically. We go to the sales force and say, okay, if you're going to be doing account targeting and closing, or if you're going to be doing initial order management, how much time does that take? Well, that's going to take me 8 hours a week, or 50 hours a week, or 2 hours, whatever it is, they come up with that math. That tells you basically the math, then, it all flows out. It tells you how many accounts you can afford to handle, and it tells you how much it costs to cover, and the total you'll see is $100,000, which is more than average for your industry, but a reasonably good salary for a high-performing sales rep. The math basically tells you how many accounts you can afford to cover with this resource. Based on that, you might go back and change your criteria and say, you know what, they need to be 80% demand fulfillment or demand creation. But here's where it gets really interesting. Over on the right, I've got a close rate. We're assuming that 5% of the companies we research actually turn into customers. And we're assuming that for every 5 accounts that we target, we end up closing 1. We end up developing enough relationship that we become one of their usual suppliers only 20% of the time. Those numbers, by the way, the 5% is actually high, the 20% is probably somewhat realistic. And once we get an initial order and we show them how great we are, 80% of the time they become a regular customer for us. So we've got a success rate over on the right. So what we've just done is we've put the cost that it takes to cover, and we've put how often we win or what our success rate is, and here's the punchline. If I do the math and I say that it costs me $100 every time I do research on a company, and only 5% of those turn into a customer, then my research is costing me $2,000 for each successful customer. And if it's costing me $2,500 to do targeting and closing, and I only close 20% of them, then each customer that I target and successfully convert has cost me $12,500. That's the $2,500 times 5, because I have to go after 5 of them to close 1. And if I have an 80% success rate and it costs me $1,000 to manage the opening order, then on average it's $1,250, because that's $1,000 divided by 0.8. That says that on average, based on this math, for me to acquire a new customer cost me $15,750. Now, someone was asking me earlier, how long does it take us to close? How long should I invest money in this sales rep before they generate any business? Well, that's the answer. Because if you figure that customer is going to hang out for at least 10 years and you're paying 10% interest, although if you are, I'd like to, sell you a bond, then that's $1,600 a year. This is how you do the math for the lifetime value of the customer. So it costs us $15,700 to acquire a new customer. When I amortize that over 10 years, it's about $1,600 a year. And then the other piece of this math is, in the blue, every customer that I've got cost me $5,000 for the ongoing relationship, $2,500 for project support, $2,500 for issue resolution. That's the cost that I spend, or what I spend every year. That's a total of $10,000. So basically, in any given year, when I have a customer, my selling cost, the cost to cover that customer, is $11,600. Now, in your latest PAW report, the average DHI distributor had 27% gross margin. The ones who focused on contractors had a 19.8% average gross margin. The ones that concentrated on end users or non-project-based work had a 35% gross margin. So I hope you can see how the math changes radically. To some extent, if you're using sales reps to call on contractor business that's low margin, you're in this endless cycle that you're never going to escape, because the money is never going to support the demand creation, and without demand creation, you're never going to expand the market, and if you don't expand the market, you're never going to have the money to spend. 35% clearly supports a lot more, and everybody knows that when you're selling, wood doors at 10% to a contractor, you're probably selling the same door to the university maintenance guy at 50% gross margin, right? So the math is a lot better. But using the 27% number, that $11,600 that it costs me for a customer every year means that if that customer can't generate $43,000 in gross margin, in revenue, in gross margin, then it's not worth doing. That's the coverage math. The math is very simple. The thinking that goes into the math and how you make these decisions is complicated. The point is not that these are the right numbers for you. The point is that it's not that hard to do the math, and you need to go through that level of diligence to answer these questions about how many sales reps, what types of sales reps, what kind of business is economical for me to get into, and how do I escape the trap of going after the low bid guys. This is a final example, and again, it's a bit of an eye strain. Once you've done the math, you can list your customers and how much time it takes to handle each customer. So you figure out your customer types, you estimate the number of customers in your region, and you do the math, and it tells you how many reps you would need to cover that territory. And of course, you refine based on your strategy. So this is our last exercise, and I'd like you to take 10 minutes. And as I said earlier, don't worry about understanding all the math in great detail. Don't worry about whether our assumptions match your assumptions or your... The point here is to take this concept or this thought process and think about how it applies to your business. Think about how you would use it. And I mean, this is for real. And Mike's going to talk at 10 till noon. Mike's going to come back and we're going to wrap up and we're going to talk a little bit more about the summit in April, where we're going to go into these concepts in a lot more detail. But for the time being, what we'd like you to do is get back into your groups, and it probably makes most sense if you can think about 2 or 3 different customers, because if you can actually visualize a customer, this becomes pretty easy. And then think about how much of a rep's time should be spent on demand creation versus demand fulfillment. Think about how frequently this customer probably should be called on, and what that implies in terms of how many reps you need, how many customers you can cover, and what are the opportunities potentially for using a tiered sales force.
And do us a favor, don't talk about the specific names of customers. Just say, I have a customer that's, and then just describe it.
Right? Yeah, important. So we'll give you 10 minutes at 11:51. Mike is going to come back. And did you get everybody's name, Steve? We're going to do the drawing at 11:51, so stick around.
Let me call time on you. One of the key important things about doing a workshop is that you end on time, especially when you're coming up to the lunch hour, just so everybody's clear. I'll be sticking around after. Steve's got a flight to catch. I'll be sticking around for a while in terms of other questions. In terms of this demand creation, demand fulfillment, different organization structures, these are really big decisions. These aren't good ideas. You can't just go and do one little tweak. Essentially what has to happen now, if we Steve, can I have the remote? Senior guy. Yeah. Can't. I have CRS. I'm terminal. Nope, did that wrong. There we go. We're on the path forward. I'm going to ask Jerry to close this thing. But what we've done is we've invested money in specific research that helps us choose tools that are appropriate for you. Here's what's afoot. There's nothing that you got out of yesterday or today that you can go back and flip a switch and do something. Well, with perhaps one exception, you might have decided, finally, I just need to kill somebody, and you're going to go home and fire them. You're on your own. Just remember what Harvey Mackay said. It's not the people you fire that make your life miserable. It's the ones you should fire that you don't that make your life miserable. All right? Now, but here's what this is intended to do. This is not aimed at all the DHI members. This is aimed at those folks that say, I want to grow my business. I'm 15 people. I'm a one-legged man at a butt-kicking contest. How do I scale? How do I scale my business? How do I grow? And instead of being reactive, it's about being intentional. So what's going to happen is there's a lot that has to happen between now and the summit. The summit in April, they're tying a ribbon around it. There's going to be a lot of content, diving more into this, but here's what you need to do before you even get there. You have to take this material back. You need to print it out. We've recorded all this stuff. You probably need to watch it again. right? This is like a drink from a fire hose. I would strongly encourage all of you to take some of the folks on your management team or the strong individual contributors, make them watch the video, give them the slide deck, make them come and explain to you what these 3 slides mean. Find some dweeb that really digs Excel and have them start to put some spreadsheets together. Steve showed you the math. A bright, talented guy can sit here and put together all kinds of spreadsheets, and you need to start populating this with your data. Here's what we're trying to do. We're giving you a set of tools and a path. You do not have to take it. We don't know how many people are going to take it. Maybe nobody will. Maybe 200 companies out of the 1,000 will. Who knows? But it gives you tools and a process. If you go back, spend the time with this, starting to say, how does these things impact our business? Look at how frustrated you were with the potential to go and grow and cost to grow, and just trying to get away from this bid project thing. It's a big challenge. You're gonna be uncomfortable. It will not feel good. You're intentionally putting yourself in a place that you're uncomfortable. There's a framework. Steve or I or our other partner Mike, we're not going to ever tell you what you need to do. We're going to teach you how to fish. We're going to give you the tools. We're going to help you figure out where you want to go fish. You have to apply this to yourself, but the goal is by the end of 2013, and there's more than just the summit. The summit's the next step. The key thing here is that by the end of 2013, if you need to be talking about succession, if you need to be talking about governance, if you need to be talking about how do all these things come together so that I can reposition my company for growth over the next decade or the next ownership change, your board and DHI has basically said, here's a path forward, and that's essentially what we're trying to do. You have enough, all you have right now is enough to start. Most people aren't going to do anything. Oh, that's a really good seminar, man. Well, that's cool, but if you really want to go forward, the big chunk of this work are the meetings you're going to be having in your own company, and you're going to have some fierce conversations, and you're going to be trying to get some data, and you're going to realize once you get into this, I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. That the things Steve was talking about, you don't know the answers to. And you're going to actually have to go out and start talking to customers. You're going to be sitting around trying to figure out what it means, and it's frustrating as hell. You have to decide, are you playing it to win or playing it not to lose? Either one's good for you. So that's essentially our workshop. By the way, Brian, that's going to be, it's actually not a new iPad. It was either an old iPad or an old Galaxy. You know, depends on however Jerry upgrades, so good luck with that. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jerry Heppies. Thank you all very much for your time.
I wasn't going to announce that to everybody that it was an old iPad. I just want to reiterate that what you saw today, again, is just step 2, but there's a lot deeper to dig going forward. We gave you guys information on the summit yesterday. I think we just about got the location set, which is a nice resort not far from downtown here that we're going to be located at. As you look at this information and the dates on it, if you register by December 21st, there's a 10% discount. We will be also offering discounts for multiple people from the same company because we want that to happen. We think it's got to be a team coming out, okay? And the pricing that we're talking about includes your room and food and everything. It's not just for the seminars. It's for the whole 3-day package is included in there. And then again, we'll go from there down to the ISC show on that Wednesday and Thursday and work. We've got our pavilion that is just about sold out. So it's a long-term commitment. And as Mike said, you know, you go back to your office and you work on this for a while, you're going to get busy again, and you need, hey, I got to get back to this. The summit's a perfect place to do that at. So thank you for your attendance. Again, Mike and Steve, great job. We appreciate it. And join us in this journey because we're going to take you to growth. Have a great day.